We left off yesterday with a journalist writing an amazing article about Dion and Gobi and trying to get Gobi back home. And the fundraising is going amazing. So let's see if we can get Gobi back reunited with Dion. 24 hours after the story came out, Dion grinned at his wife. "We did it!" They hugged. They had met their goal. They now had the money they needed to bring Gobi home. But it didn't stop there. People continued to give money on the site, and Dion started getting calls from other journalists who wanted to talk to him about he and Gobi's story. Then someone from the BBC called. A broadcaster named Phil Williams wanted to interview Dion on his radio show later that night. It was a live broadcast. Dion was nervous, but there was no way he was going to turn down the opportunity. He did the show, and afterward, the producers created a little 1-minute video from his interview and some footage from the race. The video wound up being viewed more than 14 million times on the BBC site. More radio shows invited him on as a guest. Then he started getting calls from TV shows as well, and not just British shows. A German show contacted Dion, then a Russian one, an Australian one, and several American ones as well. The story had spread worldwide, and so had the donations. People were donating from India, Venezuela, Thailand, even North Korea. It was absolutely incredible. Dion was almost overwhelmed by all the attention and this incredible level of support. These people didn't even know him or Gobi, but that didn't seem to matter. They had heard his story and they wanted to help. Now that money wasn't going to be the problem, Dion and Lucia turned their attention to the rest of the details. They were happy they could tell Kiki that it was time to move ahead and start the process of bringing Gobi home. There was a problem, though. In order to proceed, Kiki needed Nirali to take care of the medical tests and the paperwork Gobi would need, and no one had heard from Nirali in 7 days. It was frustrating. She was all the way over there in China, and Dion and Lucia were home in Edinburgh on the other side of the world. Dion had tried calling, but no one answered. He'd sent emails, but those were unanswered too. He'd even known for certain that Nirali had gotten any of his messages, and if she hadn't bothered to answer any of them, which meant they were stuck waiting on her, and that could take a while. Nirali's a doer. She gets things done, Dion explained to his wife. She thrives on being busy, and I can't imagine that she's sitting home with her feet up all the time. She's probably got 100 other projects going on, and there's no way she's going to take time off to help us. Looking after that little dog has got to be way down on her list of priorities. Lucia wasn't willing to give up, though, so we need to remind her that this matters. We need her to remember how important this is to all of us, don't we? Dion agreed, but that didn't mean Nirali would. All he could do, though, was keep trying. All of the people who had donated to their crowdfunding page were starting to get frustrated, too. It had been over a week with no new updates. What's going on? Dion didn't know what to tell them. He didn't want to admit that they were stuck, at least partially because he didn't want to have to think about that himself. So he just posted that they were still working on it and that it was going to be a long, slow process. It wasn't enough to satisfy people, but it was all he could do for now. Kiki offered to call Nirali herself, and Dion happily accepted. Kiki was Chinese, so she could speak to Nirali a lot more easily than Dion could, and maybe Nirali would be more comfortable talking to Kiki and thus more inclined to help. It was something, at least. Dion wasn't going to just sit around and wait, though. He called the race organizer who had given him her card. "This is a big deal now," he told her over the phone. "It's not just me who cares about bringing Gobi back. It's gone global. It feels like there are thousands and thousands of people all watching and wanting to know what's going on. The ones who have donated are like shareholders, and they want answers." The race organizer listened to him. I'll make it happen, she promised. And when she was done, and promised when he was done talking. Dion nearly collapsed with relief. With the race organizer on his side, Nirali would have to listen. And she did. A week later, Nirali emailed Kiki. Everything's fine, Dion reported to Luksha after talking to Kiki. Nirali said there is a lot more to do than she thought, but she's agreed to keep on looking after Gobi for now. Kiki's going to send someone to Urumqi to help make all the arrangements so Gobi can fly back to Beijing. To make things even better, Nirali sent some pictures of Gobi. She's so cute, Luksha explained upon seeing the images. Dion just nodded. It was tough to see pictures of the little dog and not be able to see her in person, but hopefully that would change soon. In the meantime, he put the pictures up on the site and posted a progress update as well. That made everyone a lot happier. They just wanted to be sure that Dion was really working on getting Gobi back. A week later, Nirali disappeared again. What now? Dion moaned. How many times could this woman vanish on him? They had put up the crowdfunding site 2 weeks ago, and as far as he knew, Gobi hadn't had a single one of those tests yet. He emailed the race organizer again. This time she didn't reply directly. Instead, he got an email from her office. She's in America, he told Luksha. So is Nirali. Her office says that she'll talk to Nirali while they're there. That way they can go over there everything in person. Luksha nodded, but she looked a little worried. Who's watching Gobi? Fortunately, Dion had the answer to that already. It looks like Nirali's father-in-law is watching her, he replied. He wasn't happy that Gobi was someone he didn't even know, but Nirali would be back home in China soon. Then they could finally get this process underway. Nirali emailed Kiki once she was back in China, and she promised to get everything moving. Then she disappeared again. Dion checked with Kiki, but she said she hadn't heard anything more from Nirali either. He tried the race organizer again, but didn't hear back from her at all, and as more time passed, he got more and more nervous. What was going on here? Then he got an email from the race organizer. All it said was, Dion, I need to ring you. Dion braced himself for the worst as he picked up the phone. Hello? Hello, Dion, said the race organizer, and he was sure he heard her sigh. I have some bad news. What kind of bad news? It's about Gobi. He heard her take a deep breath. While Nirali was in the U.S., her father-in-law was taking care of Gobi right up until the night that little dog got loose. Dion forced himself not to start shouting or yelling. That wouldn't do any good anyway. How long has she been gone? He asked instead. A few days now. Apparently she did this once before, but that time she came back when she got hungry. But she hasn't come back this time. Dion wanted to scream. Instead, he asked the organizer what was being done to find Gobi. Nirali's got people out there looking for her. They're doing the best they can to find her. Dion wasn't entirely sure he believed her. Why should any of those people care about this one little dog? It wasn't as though any of them had seen the video interviews he'd done or read any of the articles that had come out. China was extremely strict when it came to letting its people access things like the internet. Whoever Nirali got to help look for Gobi, it was unlikely they knew that literally thousands of people were waiting to hear what the little dog had that the little dog had been found again and that she would soon be traveling home. Those local researchers would have no reason to care. Of course, Dion cared. It was just his bad luck and Gobi's that he was stuck so far away. First, Dion told Luksha the news about Gobi. Then he called Kiki. Then he felt bad for hitting her with such bad news after she had been so willing to help and nice about all the delays. But he knew it was important to her to let her know what was happening. Kiki wasn't upset at him, though. Instead, she offered to call Nirali herself. That would be great, Dion admitted. Kiki had already spoken with Nerali once or twice. Since they both spoke Chinese, Dion hoped she might be able to get more information than if Dion tried. Kiki called back an hour or so later. She had spoken to Nerali and sounded more concerned than ever. There's something funny about this whole story, Kiki said. It just doesn't add up. Dion agreed. He was upset that Gobi had been able to escape from Nerali's home, and it made him paranoid that Gobi might have gone missing much earlier. Dion had so much time to think about Gobi that he had run through every possibility in his head. He was glad to know that Kiki thought something was strange too. Still, that wasn't the important part. What next? He asked instead. It didn't matter how or why Gobi had run away, as long as she was found again before she could get hurt or worse. What we need, Kiki told him, is to get more people involved in the search. How can we do that? Nerali's the only person I know in that city. But Kiki had an answer for that. I know someone here in Beijing who has experience in finding dogs. He runs an adoption shelter. Maybe he can help. Sure, give it a shot. What have we got to lose? Gobi was already missing after all. How much worse could it get? Kiki called back soon after. I spoke to my friend. He says he's happy to help, and he had some advice on what we should do next. Dion sat up. Practical advice? Excellent. Hit me, he said. First, we need a poster. It has to have been a recent picture of Gobi and good description and the location where she went missing. It also needs a contact number, and most importantly, a reward. Dion sat up straighter. This was more like it. At least designing a poster was something he could do. Then his mind caught the last word she had uttered. A reward? How much? He says 5,000 RBM to start with. RBM stood for Chinese Yuan Renminbi, which is the official currency of China. After 5,000 RBM? How much was that really? Dion pulled up an online currency converter. 5,000 turned out to be roughly $700. He laughed. He worried about the reward being some impossible sum, but $700 he could live with. Anything else? Yes, we've got to get the poster everywhere, especially digitally. Do you have WeChat? Dion didn't, but he had heard of it. WeChat was like a cross between Facebook and Twitter, but it was really big, and it was the one that the Chinese government hadn't blocked. Someone needs to set up WeChat to start sharing the news, Kiki pointed out, and then we need people on the street handing out posters. My friend says that most dogs are found within 2 or 3 miles of the place they went missing. That's where we need to concentrate all of our efforts. Oh my goodness, poor Dion and his lost little dog. Oh, I just pray that we keep, that he gets to find him tomorrow. See you then.